Okay, let's have a look at what the 4 stages of PBL design, when we're looking at designing a unit. So to start off with, the very first part is obviously to launch the project. When you're launching the project, the key words here that you'll see are called the entry events. Now, an entry event is basically something that's going to spark the imagination of the students towards the unit of work that you're going to present. So it's something that's going to kind of wow them right from the word go, to get them motivated and keen to get into your project. These can be some ideas for this videos. You can show them a YouTube clip. You might show them a movie, something that is related to your unit of work that's coming up. It might even be a previous example of a PBL product that students have actually produced. You might take them on an excursion, going to a field trip or something like that, taking them somewhere to spark their imagination, or you might even get someone to come in as a guest speaker to speak to the class. Either way, it's got to be something that's going to kind of grab the attention of your students. Once you've done that, the next stage in this is to formulate what's called your driving question. Now, the driving question is effectively the one question that is going to guide the students in their work through the entire unit. The driving question should be formulated in the students' own words. There shouldn't be too much jargon involved in it. It should be easily understandable by all of the students, and they need to be able to keep it very clearly in mind, because it's definitely going to guide where the students go with as they work their way through the unit. So quite simple, easily understandable, and if possible, once you've formulated the driving question in collaboration with the students, I would be putting that up somewhere really prominent in your classroom, so that at every time the student can come up through the various stages of the unit, they can always look up and refer back to that driving question. Another way of presenting this to your students is to basically say, at the end of this unit, you are going to demonstrate your answer to this question. Okay, so that's another way of looking at it. So that's all stage 1. Stage 2 is kind of the bit that you'll be most concerned about, because this is when you seek to build the knowledge and the understanding and the skills within the students for them to be able to answer this driving question. So effectively, this is where you teach the content. You can see the first part up the top. So within a languages perspective, if you're looking at a unit of work, this might be where all of the at the base level vocabulary that you want them to learn, this is where that would then be introduced. If there were particular grammar points that needed to be introduced as part of this unit, this is the area where you will do your teaching of that particular grammar unit, and then as part of that, I'll just quickly skip down to here, you would then formatively assess the students at this particular level on their understanding of each of these. So for example, going back to the vocab thing, you might give them every 3 or 4 days, for example, you might give them a vocabulary quiz, be it via using Quizlet or Quia or Language Perfect, for example, or a simple pen to paper exam or a quiz. So that's what it means by a mini task or a checkpoint. So that's the part that's kind of traditional, I guess, in how you would go about teaching a unit. What you also need to do here, though, is to assist the students, and you do this collaboratively, you assist them to come up with a list of need-to-know questions. So your role in doing this is to lead the students in establishing what they already know about this unit of work. And it might be they only know things that they've seen from the entry-level event back in the previous stage. But you need to be able to identify that. Then you want to know what they will need to know. So this will be, perhaps it has something to do with content. So, having taught the basic content to them, maybe the students then identify that actually that list of vocab that they've learned isn't really going to be enough for them to be able to answer that driving question. So they might need to understand, or they They might need to identify key vocabulary lists, for example, in English, that they want to find out the equivalence of. This could also be a need to know, could also be a technical question. So, if they wanted to show, if they know at a presentation stage, which comes in the last stage, that they will want to put their presentation online, they might say, well, I need to figure out what platform I can use to effectively put this online. So the need to know questions are pretty important. And again, a lot of within the research, you see the driving question, big posters put up around the room where the driving question is written out very clearly and stated, and underneath there are a table, and the students have put on one side little post-it notes where they've identified what they already know, and on the other side of the table they've put in different coloured post-it notes what they need to know. Okay, but the whole point of that is that is displayed very prominently in the classroom as a reminder to the students of where they've been and where they've got to go. After they've figured out these need-to-know questions, this is when this comes into it, the sustained inquiry. You remember from the previous slides with the essential elements for PBL, research has to be done over a number of occasions for this to be effective PBL. So it's not enough for them to just quickly jump onto Google on a one-off occasion and, put in something as a search term, take the first entry, which inevitably is a Wikipedia entry, and use that as their only form of research. They need to be able to come back on a number of occasions and critically assess what it is that they're looking at. Okay, so this could be, you could task each of the students within a group to be researching either the same point on a particular aspect of the task, or perhaps they've come up with different ideas or different research focus to work on. But the whole name of the game here is to ensure that they are coming back and doing sustained research over a few occasions. So that's stage 2. Stage 3. Now this one is really important that the students are allowed sufficient time to do this, because this is when it all starts to come together a little bit. They start to think about what they're going to do as their final product, and they're collaborating very much in groups at the moment as to how they're going to demonstrate their answer or answers to the driving question that was formulated back in stage 1. So let's have a look at the stages here. Most important, students have to have, and you'll remember this was one of the key elements, students must have voice and choice in deciding how they're going to demonstrate their understanding. Like, what is their culminating product going to take? What form is it going to take? With this, you can obviously lead them through, you can obviously supply them with a couple of ideas with what the final product might be. And actually after this recording, I'm going to I'll put up a list of just some suggestions that you could put forward to the students. But either way, it's really important that as the teacher, you don't dictate here what that final product is, because the students really need to have some ownership into this. They're the ones that are going to be producing it in the end, so they need to, right from the start, they need to know they need to be discussing what will be the best and most effective way for them to demonstrate their understanding. Very much as part of the key elements of PBL here, being able to give and receive constructive feedback at this point is really important. And depending on your stage, on the year group that you're teaching, you might be able to scaffold this really, really well. So if you've got a stage 4, stage 3 class, they actually might need some, procedures or some type of protocol when it comes to sitting down as a group and talking things through. So you might see the need, depending on your students, you might see the need to actually really instruct this, talking about turn taking, talking about kind of not hogging all the time, talking about respect and active listening to other members of your group. That type of kind of scaffolding might actually be required here, but it's important to note that this giving and receiving of feedback and those whole discussion skills are part of one of the key elements for a PBL task. So really important. that you also, that's what this next point's about, that you also now allow sufficient time for this to occur. Okay, so everyone's bringing their ideas to the table about what their culminating product will be. It's really important that you, as the teacher, have allowed enough time to facilitate these types of discussions to occur. So one of the key traps that I've seen within the research is that this particular aspect here of not allowing enough time for this review to occur has been one of the big pitfalls. They've kind of moved very quickly from the stage 2 to stage 3. This first part is like, what we're going to do together. Yes, it's going to be this. Usually it's the kind of the most assertive student who has made the decision about what their final product will be, and everything is kind of rushed through here in the desire to get the product made. Okay, but it's really important remembering that these 21st century skills, this is what we're trying to teach as part of PBL, that you allow for this procedure to actually occur. Which takes us to the fourth and final stage in a unit. This is when they actually get to do the presentation. Okay, and again, don't forget, the key thing that they're talking about is how are they going to demonstrate their answer to the driving question that was formulated back in stage 1. Now, things to remember, the key elements again is that it has to be a presentation to a public audience. Now, this audience can be their classmates, it could be to their parents, it could be to other teachers that have been invited to come and see it could be to the headmaster, for example, or a member of the executive. And in fact, as a teacher, you might want to think about inviting a member of the executive to come in and have a look at what the kids, if your students have done a really good job, make sure you get someone that's above in the executive to come in and have a look. It's a really good advocacy strategy at the same time. Subject experts, they might be able to come in, say, from a uni, someone from stage 6 or one of the classes above. Okay, the idea is remembering that if there is this public kind of accountability available through the presentation process, you'll find the students, if they know about this from the start, will really step up to make sure that they're presenting their best work. It's that whole element of, because you're going to be presenting to a group of people, you want to put your best foot forward, and it acts as a really good driver for good sustained work and effort by your students. The idea as well with the presentation, it doesn't have to be a face-to-face kind of presentation, which is really important, I think, for some of the students in your class. If you want to differentiate for the needs of those types of students who perhaps aren't all that enthused by getting up in front of a group of people and presenting, perhaps you would suggest that they might make their presentation available to the public online. And it's basically about having that type of variety available and letting the students make that decision as to how they're going to demonstrate their knowledge. Some of the research is now saying that this final production presentation also has to involve technology, but it might not be something like, having produced a fantastic movie or something like that. Perhaps the students write a survey or some type of online form, or to invite RSVPs to the class presentation event. Perhaps they make up some type of poster, for example, to advertise what's going on. They might use Glogster, for example, to make up a nice, beautiful poster. It doesn't matter, but at some stage in the process, technology, the research is now showing that it really should be involving some type of technological platform. And don't forget that realistically, what these PBL units are doing are emulating what will happen in a workplace or in a workplace environment. It's always a good thing to remember. If you were sitting down with your colleagues in your staff room, for example, and you were talking about, you're wanting to put on a languages day, just as an example, that would be something like a PBL unit. Have a look at what is going on within that process. When you sit down with your colleagues, there's discussion, there's refining, there's suggestions, there's all sorts of things that go on when you have a meeting, and that's kind of what you're trying to emulate in a PBL unit. Okay, so we'll go from here, we'll have a look at some suggested final products that you can put forward. I've put it up and put it together in a kind of a Wordle arrangement. You might want to do the same sort of thing. Either way, it'll be available for you to download and use as a resource later on.